He's not just a great cricketer, he's also tall, handsome, stylish, intelligent, and a great speaker to boot. No wonder when he gave up the bat, he took to the microphone so easily. But is that the secret of his success, or is there something more? To find out, stick with me as I introduce you to Ravi Shastri. Welcome to the program, Ravi.
Pleasure being here.
I gather, in fact, Ravi Shastri is just the short form of your name. The original, fuller version is much grander, isn't it?
I don't know if it's grander, it's definitely longer. Ravi Shankar, Jayadrita, Shastri.
I see you don't use it very often.
I think Shankar disappeared a long time ago.
And what about Jayadrita?
The commentators were struggling with it. And Jayadrita is still there, very much there.
So do you prefer to be called Ravi Jayadrita Shastri or just Ravi Shastri?
That's my name in the passport. Ravi Shastri is easier.
Okay, your father's a doctor, your mother a professor of history. What sort of childhood did you have?
I think an excellent childhood. If I've reached where I have today, it's largely due to the upbringing. My parents were brilliant in the sense that they never forced you to do anything. They were strict when they wanted to be. And what I had to achieve in life was pretty clear-cut early on as far as they were concerned. They were flexible when it came to choosing what I wanted to do, because you know, when you have a father who's a doctor, a mother who's a professor, you can be rest assured, you know, when the choice came to science, commerce, or arts, it would be first science so that you pursue a career in medicine. Otherwise, you know, then commerce and then arts. And they encouraged me to play sport. They didn't hold back anything.
Despite all that, they also say that you were quite a mischievous child.
They say that, you know, I kept them on tenterhooks, but you know, I find it hard to believe.
Really?
Really hard to believe.
You mean you towed the line every time?
Not really. I always wanted to be my own man. You know, I listened to advice when my father told me something, but he had to tell me just once.
So when you say you wanted to be your own man, does that mean you were obstinate as well, or just an individual?
An individual. Very much an individual.
But you certainly struck out in a big way with cricket, because from a very early age, you began concentrating seriously on the game. I believe it was your coach at Don Bosco's school, a certain Mr. B.D. Desai, who really took you under his wing.
Yes, unfortunately he's no more, but he did a wonderful job at that stage. Real disciplinarian. And it was the first time cricket was again being played at school. There was no cricket in Bosco's for about 10 or 15 years, I think. And then they started a team when I was in the 7th or 8th standard. I enrolled myself in, got a chance to captain the school, and we went on to win the inter-school tournament.
Did that make you a sort of schoolboy hero with everyone?
Yes, absolutely, because we'd never won a Guile Shield in a long, long time. And to go out there, under 15 that is. And I remember we beat St. Mary's, ISC, in the final, and a very close match. We won by 8 runs. But the feeling was great.
Cricket laurels kept coming your way, because in your second year in college, you made your Ranji debut. Was that a moment of great excitement or terrible nerves?
Great excitement, because you're playing with a very, very strong Bombay team. You know, you're the likes of Gavaskar, Vengsarkar, Sandeep Patil, Karsan Ghavri, who were all playing for India at that time. And to get into a side like that meant a lot. It also meant very clearly in my mind that you were good enough to belong to that company. So, you know, if you get your act together, you know, you can push
And
further.
it actually all snowballed from there, because shortly afterwards you captained the Indian under-19 team and you went to Zimbabwe and you took them to England. Was that great fun? Great
fun, because, you know, a lot of those boys went on to play for India in the future. I started with an under-19 team to Sri Lanka in 1979-80. And it was after that I went to New Zealand. But very enjoyable tours. You know, you travel the length and breadth of the country, and you know, the camaraderie amongst the youngsters was great. I also bumped into one Mr. Ranatunga at that time, who eventually became a big star in his own country. England, when we went, they had a lot of players too. And Zimbabwe was enjoyable too, because that was an under-25 team much later, but against a full Zimbabwe side, because they were qualifying for, they were trying to get test match status at that time. So that was a great experience too.
Now, in fact, you got into a small scrape as well at that time. You were caught once with beer bottles in your room. What happened?
Yes, we had a pretty strict steward, and we trained hard. And when it came to some time off, we liked to be left alone. And I happened to be the captain of that side, and there were a couple of boys on the side who said, you know, let's have a drink. I said, why not? So we were having a couple of beers in the room, where the steward came up and picked up the bottle, and he said, you're drinking lager beer. I'm going to take this to the secretary of the board. I said, hang on. I said, there's still half a bottle of beer left. Let me finish it. Now you can take this bottle and go. And he went to one Mr. Nagaraj, who was the then Honorary Secretary of the Karnataka State Cricket Association, and complained to him. So straight away I was summoned down and asked the question, did you do it? I said, yes, I did it. And Mr. Nagaraj said, you know, you're the captain of the side, you know, how can you do this? I said, before you say anything, sir, I have a glass of beer with my father, and he's the man I admire and respect the most. I don't think I'm doing anything wrong.
And did he accept this?
Yeah, he did.
So honesty in a sense paid off.
There was no other way I was going. The only other way was for him to take a different decision and probably sack me from that camp.
It actually
Luckily, he kept me there.
More than that, it had no impact on you whatsoever, because in March of '81, almost 20 years ago, you made your debut for India against New Zealand in Wellington. Looking back on it, how do you remember that game?
Well, I had hardly any time to remember that game, Karan, because I was playing a Ranji Trophy game in Kanpur, and I had a miserable game. And I was out for 0 in both innings, and I remember one morning I came out of the door I was sharing a room with Rahul Mankad at that time, and you know, I opened the door and went out to get the newspaper, and I had the security guard there who said, Mubarako. You know, I said, congratulations. I said, why, what happened? They said, no, I've just heard on the radio that, you know, you've been called to New Zealand because Dilip Doshi is injured, and they've informed the Board of Control. And I didn't know anything about this.
It literally was as much of a surprise as that.
Yeah. Flew to Bombay the next day, and then flew 30 hours to New Zealand. And I reached Wellington at about 10 o'clock, 10:30 in the evening. Next morning, Sunil won the toss, or lost the toss. I'm not too sure. We were fielding. So that didn't give you any time, because before you realize, he told you in the morning, Ravi, you're playing this game. You know, normally you get to know, I got to know just 10 or 15 minutes before the start of play that you're playing. Next thing, you're out there in the middle. Next thing, you're bowling.
And next thing you had 3 wickets in 4 balls.
Yeah. So I could only think about it once that first test
and then
match
3
was
more
over.
in the next innings as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't have had a better start. Actually, right through that New Zealand series, you ended up with 15 wickets in 3 tests. That's quite an incredible start.
Just the kind of start any youngster would be hoping for.
The sort of stuff you were dreaming of.
Absolutely. Especially when you're just 18 or 19 years of age and playing overseas. It's always harder for a spin bowler to, you know, get the sticks overseas, and that did my confidence a world of good. And I didn't look back.
In fact, luck was very much on your side, because shortly thereafter, you made your first test century against Pakistan. You weren't even 21. Imran was in his prime, and you thrashed him to the boundary several times.
I'm not too sure whether I thrashed him to the boundary or not, but I got behind every delivery of his and Sarfaraz Nawaz's. And I think credit there must be given to Sunny, because he had more confidence in my ability than I had at that stage in my ability as an opening batsman. Because I'd not played for a good 2 or 3 weeks. At that time I had a split webbing, and India were being thrashed at that stage. Imran was rampant, and Sunny walked into the room one evening, this is 2 days before the test match, and said, Ravi, you're playing the last test. So I said, Sunny, I've still got, you know, stitches in my hand. He said, aren't they coming off tomorrow? I said, yes, they are. He said, you're playing in your opening. And that, you know, the adrenaline suddenly started pumping. I said, that's fine, because you can't do anything worse.
You like challenges, don't you?
I love challenges. And you couldn't do anything worse than what had already happened. And you just said to yourself, if you go out there and get a 40 or a 50 or a 60, you're made, man. And more important than that, it's the confidence you'll get, because you're up against 2 top quality fast
You ended
bowlers.
up with 120 something, didn't you?
120 something, yeah. So, the rest is history.
Looking at your career, would you say that the period 84-85 in a sense was a golden age for you?
I think the best year in my international career, because anything you did was like gold, whether with the bat, whether with the ball, whether it was international cricket, whether it was one-day cricket, whether it was domestic cricket, whether Ranji Trophy.
And it began magnificently, didn't it? It began with that Ranji game against Baroda when you got 6 sixes in an over.
In fact, that was towards the end of the season. It's the year started extremely well, because we went to Pakistan, and we had just 2 test matches. That was the series where unfortunately we had to come back because of the death of Mrs. Indira Gandhi. But I'd got an 80 and 100 and 140 in one of those test matches in the 2 we played. Then we played England. I'd got 100 in the first test. Third test you got 100. There's a one-day international in between, you got 100.
It's becoming monotonous.
Yes, and then the 200. So by the time you got that 200, you had a lot of form under your belt.
And by the time you got the 6 sixes equaling Gary Sober's record, were you just about saying to yourself, oh, this is the sort of thing I do for breakfast?
Certainly not. That's at that time I really didn't rate it that highly because it wasn't a test match. It was a first-class game. But today, if you ask me, I would say that's one of my greatest achievements because, you know, only 2 people have done it. Sometimes it sinks in later, and you say, you know, only 2 guys have done it in 130, 140 years of cricket. And when you travel, you know, people remember you 6 sixes and then over. They forget about what you've done in test matches or whether you've done anything at all in test matches. But
the day it happened, you had great fun telling your mother the news, or actually not telling her the news, isn't that right?
Well, that's a very interesting story there because I came back late the previous night. I think it was around 1 o'clock or 1:30, and Mom opened the door, didn't say a word, and when she opened the door, there was a clock. Right, you know, as I entered, I could see the clock, and she was looking at the clock. It was just about to strike 1, and she said, "You've got a game tomorrow. This is the time. You know, you come." Didn't say a word. Straight into my room. I said, "Just wake me up at 7:15. Slept. Got up, demanded my idlis and coffee. Had that and left for the game. I said, I'll be back to collect some baggage because I'm taking a flight in the evening to Madras. So when I got back, she was waiting. I said, nothing, you know, I had a problem with an umpire and, you know, some arguments and, you know, forget it, I'll tell you later. So this is what happens when you come back late in the night. And I took my baggage and I went. And then she heard it on the news. And then when I spoke to her, she was pretty upset.
And then there was another great thing that happened in that amazing, incredible year. You became champion of champions at the World Championship of Cricket. Did you expect it, or did you actually surprise yourself with the achievement?
I wouldn't say I expected it. Neither would I say I surprised myself, because the kind of form I was in at that moment, when I landed in Australia, I knew I was capable of delivering against the best. And when I look back at my career, I think that was the period of time when I, as an all-rounder, you know, I was at my peak, because the batting was good, the bowling was consistent, and you were fit.
I've often read that you consider the 100 you got in '89 in Barbados as your best batting performance. Is that really so?
Yes, simply because West Indies was the side to beat in the 80s. And what people often forget, that cricket can be a very physical game, especially when someone's out there to intimidate you. Now that's the challenge. That's the challenge you want to come out of. You know, when someone's trying to blast your head off or, you know, hit you on the nuts or whatever to get you out of the pitch as quickly as possible, even if they can't bowl you, get you out caught or leg before wicket. Then to stand up and deliver and get the runs is always satisfying. That particular innings, I was batting at 3. I remember Sidhu was out first ball. India was 60 for 6 at one stage. We ended up losing the test match, but from 60 for 6 to still get 100, it for me was very, very satisfying, and that too in Barbados.
And in fact, in a sense, it is again the challenge that brought it out in you.
The challenge, definite challenge, because you're performing against the best, so it lifts you. You know, often when I got into a situation like this, I would say in my mind, you know, there's a typical Indian saying, "Jungle mein mor nacha kisne dekha." You know, for me it would be, come on, man, you do it against Tom, Dick, and Harry, no one's going to rate you.
But in the
you
West
do it
Indies.
now. You do it now here, you'll be rated. So if you go out there and do it and play to the best of your ability, there's no reason why you cannot.
And in a sense, that also happened in Jamaica, didn't it? Because you got your best bowling there, 4 for 40, and you had all the big scalps.
That was earlier in 1983, yes. And again, it was tough because I remember my first ever ball I bowled to Vivian Richards, and Kapil handled me the ball. He was on strike, and all I'd heard was about this great, great player and seen him loads of times on television. And the first ball pitched, it bounced, it hit the glove, and Sir Venkatraman was there to take the catch. And you know, that the feeling was tremendous, because the first ball of your life to the greatest batsman who I've ever seen.
And you get his wicket.
And you get his wicket, at least made your job easier for that day.
Ravi, let's take a break. I want to come back and talk a little bit about how you look back on your career today, now that you've actually given up playing and become a commentator. We'll be back in just a couple of moments. Stick with us. Welcome back. My guest is Ravi Shastri. Ravi, in the early 90s, injury afflicted you. Were you able to fulfill your potential, or do you think fate cheated you?
Tough lines there. I think I'd not fulfilled my potential. Certainly not. I thought I was at the peak of my career as a batsman. I'd hit a double hundred against the Australians in Sydney, and then I was injured a week later. So I didn't play in that series after that. I came back a little too soon against the South Africans, and then it went again, and then I had to quit. But it wasn't a good time because I knew if I'd carried on for another 3-4 years, the best of my batting was still to come.
You were captain of practically everything, from the school team to the college team, the Ranji team, the under-2019 team, as well as West Zone. But you never made it to captain of India officially. Is that a disappointment?
I did.
Just one game when Venksagar fell in.
Yes, it was against the West Indies, and we beat them. We hammered them in 3.5
Madras
days.
in 88.
Yeah.
But that was as a stand-in, in your
Yes.
own right?
In my own right, obviously the selectors never thought I was good enough. That's the only way I can answer it, because you'd won literally every damn tournament this country had.
The commentators always said that you were someone who was virtually groomed to be captain. When it didn't happen, did it leave you feeling a little bitter?
Not at all, not at all. It's, I just felt a little disappointed because had they carried on with me after we won that series against the West Indies, in fact we drew the series, we won that test match, I think it would have been a pretty good time for Indian cricket, because I was upbeat, I could be ruthless at times, and it was just the kind of bloke India were looking for at that stage.
So it was just bad luck that they didn't hit on you?
Tough luck, and you've got to carry on with your game and not worry about it too much.
You had two sort of criticisms to face up to when you were playing. One was often said that you bat slowly, but was that being unfair?
I know I went through a period in the mid-80s when the crowd got after me, the press got after me. It was disappointing. Probably they expected too much. There was also a lot of jealousy, probably, for the achievements you had, and you being talked about everywhere you went. So it was a mixture of a lot of things, and it started with 10 or 15 people starting it, and then it just caught on. It hurt, but I thought it was pretty unfair, because at times you were asked to do a job, where because there was nobody else, you had to do it. For example, opening the batting in a one-day game in Australia in the mid-80s or early 90s. Why do you want me to open? I can come into the side as an all-rounder at number 6 and do a pretty good job. A, you don't have anybody. 2, you want to send somebody in there as a makeshift and then expect him to blast the bowling and get on with it, when it is not your game.
And also, isn't it true that a lot of time during the early 90s in particular, when they were critical of your speed of batting, India didn't even last all 50 overs?
It's true. It's true. Where it happened a lot in Australia, where we would be bowled out, and that's one of the main reasons why I was asked to open the innings, to hold one end up and try and see that we get a decent score on the board. But at the end of it all, I have absolutely no regrets.
The other criticism, in a sense, which you yourself mentioned, came from the stands. There were terrible moments sometimes when they used to shout Ravi Shastri, hi, hi. Did that hurt a lot?
Oh, it did hurt. Definitely hurt, but it made you more determined. Some of my best performances came when, they were at you.
Because you were determined to prove them wrong.
Oh, yes. I just treated it as if they're saying Ravi Shastri, hi, hi, H-I, H-I. And just dinned it into my head and went out there focused and out there to do a job.
This is another sort of challenge that actually brought out the best in you.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a bit about you personally. They often said that you were aloof, that you didn't mix with the lads. Is that true?
I was always one of the lads. You'd find me in a bar having a drink, you'd find me in a nightclub, at the end of a game, you'd find me training as hard as anybody with the other
So this again
players.
was a sort of jealousy, because they wanted to get at you and this was the only way they could.
Absolutely.
In fact, the interesting thing is, there was a period in time when you were considered very much a ladies' man, a sort of cricket Casanova.
Now that I read in the newspaper.
It's not true?
I really didn't know about it. Well, I went out, you were young, you were a bachelor, you were doing well in your cricket, so,
You mean to say seriously that all those stories about Amrita Singh or even Gabriella Sabatini weren't true?
Oh, that's true. I mean, I've said that before, but what I'm trying to say is when you're young, when you're a bachelor, when you're doing well in your profession, obviously you get a you get attention, and I quite enjoyed the attention.
And the girls just come naturally.
I wouldn't say that. You had to do some fielding there too.
In 1990, you got married to your wife Ritu. Where and how did you meet?
Coincidence. In fact, I was here for a game, a benefit game in Delhi, a benefit game for Parthasarathi Sharma, the former Rajasthan batsman, played for India too. And this game, I think, was in Meerut. And we'd arrived the night before. Sunny and me had arrived the night before at the Taj Palace. We were staying there. And I'd disappeared somewhere with friends for a drink or out into town. And Sunny was in the hotel. And he was having a meal at the Chinese restaurant there. And there were a group of girls who sent him a bottle of wine or something like that, and went up and took an autograph, and he invited them for the game. So he said, oh, we'll be only too happy to come and watch the game. And we were leaving at about 6:37 in the morning. So when I came down at 6:45, I suddenly see 8 or 10 women there. I said, Jesus Christ, what's happening here? Anyway, we got introduced there. Ritu was one of the girls there. Got introduced there, and well, I took a liking for her.
You're telling me she's a
straight
fan
away.
who became a wife?
She didn't know a word about cricket. She was a huge fan of Gavaskar at that time, and I was introduced to her, and I took a liking straight away.
After you gave up cricket, you took to commentating. Was it a difficult transition to make?
Not easy. Let's put it that way. Different discipline. Work ethics were very similar. You had concentration was very important. You had to be focused, very single-minded. But otherwise, the tough part was getting used to the discipline.
What about learning of facts and histories of all the players?
Well, luckily that I had a decent memory, so that helped initially. Plus the fact that you had just finished the game, you knew the rules and all those sorts of things. Plus you knew the players, you knew the form of the players pretty well. Players who were good in
You make it sound as if it came as
part of the
second
world.
nature to you, actually.
Because I didn't have much time once I finished the game. So
You
that
just
was good in a
flowed
way,
in.
because the flow was there, and you'd been around for quite some time. You'd been around for 14 years on the circuit.
I get the distinct impression you enjoy it very much.
I do enjoy it. I really enjoy the job. It's tough at times, it's demanding, but they say when you enjoy something, you keep at it.
Well, let's hope you keep at it for a long time, because you've got millions of fans who enjoy the way you do it. Ravi, thank you very much for a
Thank you,
lovely
Sam.
interview.
Pleasure.